this lesson deals with the political, socio-cultural and economic impacts of disaster. It is very important to understand the political, socio-cultural and economic impact of disaster on refugee. This will help to understand the consequences of these impacts on the lives of refugees. This will not only guide us to examine the existing mechanisms and possibilities to address their political, socio-cultural and economic concerns, but also to propose viable alternatives to address these issues. Objectives. On the completion of this lesson, you should be able to know the impact of disaster on political, socio-cultural and economic spheres of refugees, to understand the consequences of these impacts on the lives of the refugees, and to examine the mechanisms and existing possibilities to address their political, socio-cultural and economic concerns. Impact of disaster on refugees. In the past few decades, the number of refugees is increasing. Consequently, it has become very difficult to accommodate them and provide a safe place to stay. It becomes much more difficult to meet the basic needs and requirements of these refugees. First, we need to understand that it is not the pull factors such as the economic opportunities and better social and cultural life attracted them to move out of their country. It is a push factor such as the war, violence or persecution has forced them to move out of their home country in search of a safe place to stay. When they move out of their country, they have to leave behind all their wealth and asset. Even the social capital which they have built for all these years has to be left behind. They have to start a fresh life in a new place. Around 144 countries are parties to the 1951 Convention on the Status of Refugees. These countries, based on the provisions of the Convention, will provide certain basic facilities to the refugees. However, for the non-signatory countries, it is not mandatory to accommodate them and provide basic facilities. Even the signatory countries provide facilities based on the resources available. If there is resource constraints, then the condition of refugee becomes worse. The refugees are socially, culturally, economically and politically vulnerable in the new country. In many of the host countries, sometimes they encounter discrimination and oppression. Either it can happen overtly or covertly. It could be because of their color, the language or accent they speak, the clothes they wear, the religion they follow or the food they eat. People have very strong opinion on some of other person's attributes. Similarly, the opinion of the people in the host nation will have an effect on the way the refugees are treated. The resources allocation for the welfare of the refugees also depends on their opinion about refugees. Therefore, the social and cultural aspects of the refugee not only determines their treatment by the host country, but also the resource allocation for their development. Despite the cultural conflict, economic instability, language barriers, other forms of discrimination and oppressions, the refugees move to the host country because of their vulnerability in their home country. Sometime when they take refuge in the host country, they get better opportunities and freedom compared to their homeland. Especially the people from underdeveloped country affected with war, violence and drought, their condition will be worse than the host country. For example, people move from Africa to Europe or America or Sri Lanka to Canada or UK as refugee. However, This will not be the situation in most of the cases. The refugees will have negative impact socially, economically, politically and culturally. Economic. The refugees have to leave their place of birth mostly unexpectedly because of war or violence and persecution. Moving out of their place of origin will affect their lives and livelihood. They have to leave their house and all their belongings and have to start a new life in a new place. Either they have left all their property and assets at their hometown, or their property and assets got destroyed in the war or violence. All their lifelong savings and earnings have gone and they have to start their life afresh. Social. This not only affects them economically, but it also affects them socially. Their social life becomes threat after they become refugees. Human beings are social beings. They live in a society with some social belongingness. They have a mutual understanding between them, and in the time of crisis, they help each other. This becomes their social capital. The social belongingness and the support they receive gives them strength and helps for their development. They share their happiness and sorrows and have a bond. This will get disrupted and destroyed once they move to a new place. Their safety net will get destroyed and they have to build a new social circle and a social life. The education, health, shelter are also part of the social aspects. Without these aspects, the social life of the person cannot be fully flourished. Once they move to a new place, the education of the children will get affected. The refugees are affected by war and violence, so they will be having physical injuries. Moreover, moving to new place and lack of basic amenities increases their health vulnerabilities. The lack of safe place to sleep and take rest affects them physically and mentally. These commodities are very much important for the development of human capital. This human capital is very much important for their being and doing. Cultural. Cultural life is a very important and it helps majority in building the social capital. The culture of a community is evolved over a period of time based on their geographical location, availability of resources, food habits, religious practice, etc. Every community follow their culture very religiously and they have lot of sentiments attached to it. This cultural life even becomes the base for their social and economic life. When they move to a new place, their cultural life gets disrupted. The host country will not understand their cultural life because each and every country will have their own culture and they have indifferent opinion on the other cultures and they always believe that their culture is superior and others inferior. It becomes mandatory for the refugees to adjust with the new culture of the host nation and also should accommodate their own culture. Political. Political life of the person will be affected as they move out of their country. They will lose their identity. In most of the cases, their personal identity proofs get destroyed by war or violence. In some cases, because they are moving out of country in emergency situation, they fail to take their personal identity proofs. Without their identity proofs, they are nameless, stateless, nationless people. Both their personal and political identity is destroyed and it has to be recreated. Even if they create their identity or have their identity proofs, however, the host country might have their own political system and the refugees will not be readily allowed to take part in the political process of the country. Usually, only the citizens of the nations will be allowed to take part in the political process of the nation. The refugees and the asylum seekers will be considered as outsiders and will be kept away from the political process. Taking part in their political process will help them to get more resources and services from the host country. To gain this, they have to get the nationality of the host country, but in most cases, it is very difficult to get the nationality of the host country and to take part in their political process. Diagrammatic representation of effect of disaster on the lives of refugees. It is of 4 types, that is social, economic, political and cultural. Understanding experiences of refugees. 3 things needed to understand the experiences of the refugees are: 1. Understanding the refugees, 2. Reason for leaving their home country, and 3. Adjustments required in host country. These 3 aspects are very much interrelated. One has a very close association and effect on the other aspect. Understanding these 3 aspects is prerequisite to know the experiences of the refugee and to work better with them. Next, the diagrammatic representation for understanding experiences of refugees are of 3 types, that is understanding of refugee condition, reason for leaving home country and adjustment required in host country. Now, understanding of refugee condition are of social condition, status in home country, experiences in home country. Now, the reason for leaving home country are war, persecution and violence. The adjustment required in host country are social life, lifestyle and cultural. Understanding the refugees. To work with the refugees, we need to know their condition before leaving their country. Each and every person belongs to different social and economic status. Their lifestyle and culture may vary according to their position in the society. So, a person when they move to another country as a refugee, their mindset will not be the same according to their position, their expectation will vary. However, it may not be possible to provide services as per their position and status. Even then, it is prerequisite to understand the refuge status at their home country properly to make appropriate intervention. Reason for leaving their home country. People move out of their home country as refugee to a new country because of various reasons such as war, violence, persecution, drought, etc. The effect on the person will mainly depend on the reason for leaving the country and the experience they had before migrating. There will be differential impact on their lives depending on the reason for leaving and the experiences they have encountered. For example, in case of war, it will have a very bad effect on their social, economic and other condition. Either they have to leave behind their house and other properties, or all their properties would have got destroyed and they might have lost their family members. Similarly, in case of violence, persecution and drought have different effect on the lives of the refugee. It is necessary to know the reason for leaving their country and also the experiences of their migration. Adjustment required in host country. Every individual has different skill, yet some of them are very effective in managing unfamiliar environment and some are not. Depending on their skill, they manage problems and get adjusted in the new environment. Secondly, the receptiveness and acceptance of the host country is also important. If they are very rigid in their lifestyle and culture, it would be very difficult to accommodate to the new environment. Role of a social worker. As the refugees are undergoing a very difficult situation physically, socially, economically, culturally, it is very challenging to work with them. And majority believes that it is a transition period. They will prefer to return back to their home country. Their situation will become normalized after that. When they flee their country was very sudden without much preparation and plans. So whatever belongings they can carry, they take that and move. They would have encountered considerable atrocities, degradation and violation of human rights. Even after they escape from that situation, it is not sure that all their rights and needs will be ensured by the host country, because the host country also has their own limitations and they cannot fulfill all their expectations. Moreover, even in the host country also, there are possibilities for the refugees to face discrimination and degradation. Many times, these practices will not be overt. It will happen at a very subtle level, so it is very difficult to address. Within this constrained situation, the social worker has to play a significant role and ensure the rights of the refugees. Some of the key roles of the social worker in these situations to address the problems of the refugees are: 1. Building professional relationship. 2. Developing cultural competencies. 3. Problem identification and assessment. 4. Service utilization. 5. Timely intervention. The diagrammatic representation of role of social worker are: professional relationship, cultural competencies, problem identification and assessment, service utilization and timely intervention. Some of the essential aspects when understanding the refugees are: evaluating resources such as social, economic and cultural integration, assess their unrealistic and realistic expectations, exploring their family functioning in culturally different place, evaluating their problem solving abilities, identifying their work skills and measuring their learning capabilities and motivation for adaptation. Building professional relationship. The refugees have lot of mistrust on the government authorities because they have undergone lot of atrocities, violence and discrimination in their country, and the government did not took appropriate measure to address their problem. In some cases, the atrocities, violence and discrimination were by the government. Therefore, in the host country, they carry their old experiences and will not have any trust in the host government as well as the development professional representing the host country. So, establishing a rapport and gain trust among the refugee is the foremost important requirement to establish relationship with the client to undertake any response in their problems. Secondly, instead of sympathy approach, an empathetic approach towards the refuge situation is very much required. They look for a person who can understand their problem better and address their problem in a more empathetic way. Thirdly, they should use a directive approach. The social worker should be in a position to guide them properly. They see the social worker as a knowledgeable person who can understand their problem and provide appropriate solution. Accordingly, the social worker should act and provide solutions to their problem. Fourthly, self-disclosure of the social worker is important. It will help to establish rapport and also to gain trust among the refugees. However, the self-disclosure should be at a professional level, not at a personal level. Otherwise, the client will not take them seriously and will not share their problems. Cultural competency. There is duality of cultures. They practice one culture and the host country has a different culture. Often they get stuck within this duality. There is always a conflict as they have to safeguard their culture at the same time. They have to function with norms and expectations of the host country. So the refugees will be in a culture shock on seeing an alien environment having a different language, societal norms and values, social structures of the society, expectations which are either fully or partially different from their country. The client's psychological capability of coping with the alien culture should be developed. The traditional approach will not be effective in this situation as it subscribes only a unified solution to all problems. In these situations, the social worker has to be ethnically sensitive. According to socio-cultural norms, the services should be provided. LUM 2003 identified 4 components for cultural competence: cultural awareness, knowledge acquisition, skill development and inductive learning. These 4 components will help the client to adjust with the alien culture. Problem identification and assessment. Problem identification is a complex process. Understanding their experience and cultural competence is very much required. That it will give the social worker to assess the extent of their problem and the probable mechanisms to address it. Healthy rapport with the client is very crucial to identify and assess the problem. If the problem identification is not appropriate, the measures prescribed will also go wrong. When we identify the difficulties, we need to assess whether the problem is of the individual or at the societal level. Accordingly, the strategies should be derived to address the problem. Lazarus conceptualized a biophysical model to understand the problem of individuals. In the biophysical model, both the person, behavior and attitude problems as well as the physical problems are considered. Ecological perspective is very important to understand the individual experiences in a society. It tries to capture how the social environment of a person has an effect on him. Behavior of a person is assessed on the basis of appropriateness. However, appropriateness should be assessed whether it is culturally accepted and within the boundaries. The role of social worker is to understand the client's cultural norms, observe their behavior, assess what changes is required among the clients, help the client to understand the need for change, and help the client to manage with the resentment from the society during the change process. Service utilization. Refugees usually underutilize the social services. Once they feel they can take care of themselves, they prefer to move away. Though initially they have lot of struggles in adjusting and taking care of basic needs, however, within a short period they slowly adjust themselves and take care of their needs. In most cases, they will not readily come out to utilize the services. Instead, they presume that they can manage. Only when others starts pointing their apathy, they realize their condition and take some support from the agencies or government. Their perceived self-sufficiency on one side can be seen as their strength, but we have to be very cautious as it may have some detrimental effect because of insufficient resources to meet their basic needs. Their overall development will get affected. Timely intervention. For timely intervention and understanding on the problems of refugees and their cultural competencies are prerequisite. While understanding the refugees, we need to know their social, economic, cultural and political background. This will help us to examine their competencies, in addressing the issues. All these will help the social worker to provide a timely intervention to the client, failing which it will put the client both physically and psychologically under stress and anxiety. Timely intervention will help them to address the problems when it is small. Otherwise, the problem will get magnified and becomes difficult to address at the later stage. Moreover, the client's morale will also get affected when the magnitude of the problem increases. Challenges in addressing the refugee problems. Some of the basic challenges the social worker encounter while addressing the problems of refugees are: 1. Resistance, 2. Communication barrier, 3. Non-disclosure, and 4. Value of privacy. Now, the challenges for social work intervention are resistance, communication barrier, non-disclosure, and value of privacy. The refugees have lot of apprehension on the government authorities and the development organization to reveal their personal experiences. This resistance among the refugees is because of the fear and mistrust of the authority. The self-disclosure of the refugee will not happen. They closely guard information and will not reveal it to anyone because there is a possibility of deportation to their home country and they have to face violence, atrocities and discrimination if they reveal the information. Only when the social worker establishes trust and credible relationship, they will disclose their information, which is vital for the intervention. The refugees have a different language and culture, so it becomes sometimes very difficult to communicate with refugees. This will hinder most of the intervention process. There is a lot of possibility of miscommunication because of the language barrier. This miscommunication further leads to mistrust among the refugees. The culture the refugees follow also becomes a barrier in communication with them. Lastly, the refugee also wants to have some privacy of their life, so they prefer not to reveal all the information related to their personal life. We cannot expect someone to reveal all their personal information in the public. This has to be valued because everyone has their own private life. Therefore, information which is required to understand their problem to provide proper intervention should be stressed and their other personal information can be avoided. Summary: the nature of problem varies depending upon the reasons for moving out of their home country and their experiences during migration. A deep understanding on the nature of problem and building a trustworthy, credible relationship is required to intervene and address the problems of the refugee effectively. This lesson orients the reader to know and to understand the various problems faced by the refugees. It also provides a framework for the social worker and other development worker on the ways to work with refugees.